to this workshop on internet fragmentation, net neutrality, and zero rating. First of all, thank you to the Federal Telecommunications Institute for putting this together. We have an excellent group of panelists, very well balanced views, so I hope you are able also to engage and follow with the panel. Let me just tell you how we're going to do this today. First of all, we're going to have a brief introduction from our colleagues from the the Federal Telecommunications Institute in Mexico. They're going to explain a little bit what was the spirit of this proposing this this workshop. Then I'm going to introduce each one of the panelists, and I'm going to ask each one of them one question. One of the questions that was included in the background paper, which was uploaded into the workshop and IGF website. Then I will give them 5 minutes. So this will take us the first 35 minutes. After that, I might be making one additional questions to some of the panelists, and then we will open the floor for some interaction. So without far ado delay, I'm going to ask Victor Martinez to introduce the audience the idea of this workshop. So, Victor.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Thank you all, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to the Institute to have this the first time that the Federal Telecommunications Institute organized a workshop inside the IGF. As may you know, in Mexico, this institution is a new body, is an agency in charge of regulation of the telecommunications and broadcasting sectors, and also is the authority in competition matters for those sectors. And also we have the mandate to collaborate with the all Mexican bodies in charge to guarantee the access to telecoms and broadcasting services, including broadband and internet. Then it's also for us very important to be here and to collaborate with the multi-stakeholder community in order to capture and collect all the ideas and visions inside these very important issues as is fragmentation of internet and net neutrality. And this is our general view is to discuss some matters in general for internet fragmentation, and then try to introduce in some commercial practices that we need to capture and to see when we are talking about net neutrality. But thank you again. Thank you all for the panelists, for the moderator to accept this invitation, and that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for organizing. So let me introduce you to the panelists in, of course, no particular order. So we have Cristina Monti. Cristina Monti is Head of Sector for Internet Governance and Stakeholders Engagement in the Next Generation Internet Unit of the Directorate General for Communications Network, Content and Technologies, DG Connect of the European Commission. She contributes to the European Commission activities in the area of Internet governance, more specifically in relation to the Internet Governance Forum, IGF, and the Global Internet Policy Observatory. She's also the accredited alternate representative of the European Commission to the Governmental Advisory Committee of ICANN. So welcome, Cristina. We have Mario Fromo, Commissioner Fromo. He has a work experience of more than 20 years, both in the public and private sector at national and international level in technological foresight, public policy, and regulation of telecommunications and broadcasting. He obtained the diplomas of electrical techniques and engineering in communication and electronics by the National Polytechnic Institute of Mexico, and the degree of Master in Sciences in Engineering by the University of Kyoto of Japan. He served as an optical communication researcher at the Research and Technology Development Laboratories of the Japanese company Kokusai Denshin Denwa, and associate researcher at the Media Laboratory of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He has been a member of the Institute of Communications, Computer and Electronics Engineers of Japan and the College of Mechanical Engineers and Electricians of Mexico. The 10th of September of 2013, he was ratified by the Senate of Mexico as Commissioner to the Federal Institute of Telecommunications for a period that will conclude as of February of year 2021. Commissioner Fromo has an extensive experience in the international arena. He's been head of delegation for Mexico in many ICT-related events, including, of course, the WCIT in 2012. Commissioner Fromo, welcome. We have Commissioner Mignon Clyburn. Commissioner Clyburn is a commissioner of the United States Federal Communications Commission. She's serving now a second term as a Democrat on the commission. Commissioner Clyburn began her service at the FCC in August 2009. A longtime champion of consumers and a defender of the public interest, Commissioner Clyburn considers every commission proceeding with an eye toward how it will affect citizens. She has fought to promote strong competition across all communication platforms, believing that the more robust and competitive the marketplace, the less need there is for regulation. However, when the market is not adequately addressing consumer concerns, Clyburn is an outspoken champion for smart, targeted regulatory action. Commissioner Clyburn, a pleasure to have you here. We have remote, I hope he's listening to us, William Drake. William Drake is an international fellow and lecturer in the Institute of Mass Communication and Media Research at the University of Zurich. He is currently a member of the nominating committee in ICANN, in which he has also served as a GNSO counselor and civil society constituency chair over the last decade. Bill also was involved in the initial development of the IGF as a member of the UN Working Group on Internet Governance, as well as in the IG Summer Schools and the Global Internet Governance Academic Network. Welcome remotely, Bill. Is he connected? Yes? Can he acknowledge that? Yes. Yes. So, okay, so later today, I don't know if Chinmayi Arun has already arrived, but she'll be here shortly. Chinmayi Arun is Executive Director of the Center of Communications Governance at National Law University in Delhi, which is the only academic research center in India working on issues of information law and policy. She's also an assistant professor of law at National Law University Delhi, a faculty associate of the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University, and a member of the board of directors of the Digital Asia Hub. We will be welcoming her shortly. And Dr. Alejandro Pisanti excused. He is no longer joining us, but we have the pleasure and the privilege to have with us Roslyn Layton. She's a PhD fellow at Aalborg University in Copenhagen. Thank you very much for being here. Probably when I ask you the first question, you can help us with some more information about your background, please. So, okay, we're ready to roll, and we're going to start with Bill Drake. We know he is connected, and we're going to ask him one of the questions. So, Bill Drake, the concept of internet fragmentation varies according to the government, industrial, civil society, or academia. Bill, from your point of view, what can be understood by internet fragmentation? You have 5 minutes.
Am I being heard?
Yes, yes, Bill, we can hear you.
Okay, fine, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Sorry not to be there. This is the first IGF meeting I have missed since before the beginning of the IGF. So I've been asked to just say a few words about the nature of fragmentation. I think a reference point for me in this is a paper that I did with Vint Cerf and Wolfgang Kleinvector for the World Economic Forum that we released in Davos earlier this year, where we attempted to try to do a sort of landscape overview of the problem of fragmentation, recognizing that, as was indicated in the introduction, people tend to talk about this term and deploy the term in very different ways. So the way business people talk about fragmentation, often they cite anything that sort of raises their costs of doing business on a global scale. Technical people tend to emphasize engineering problems, etc. Human rights people tend to emphasize the spread of censorship and so on. So everybody has different kinds of views, which means to me that you need to take a sort of holistic step backwards and look at the big picture and recognize that there's a lot of different types of phenomena that can be related to the question of fragmentation. Not unlike what we went through over a decade ago with the debate over what does it mean to talk about internet governance. My baseline in talking about this is to start from the original architectural vision of the internet that engineers like Vint had in setting it up, was that many separately controlled autonomous systems or networks, of which there are now, what, 50,000, can come together via shared protocols to constitute a global network of packet switch networks, such that every device is able to exchange data packets with any other device that's willing to receive them. That's a key point, the willingness of both endpoints to communicate with consistent functioning and interoperability on an end-to-end basis. So that you should be able to have applications that work the same for endpoint users, irrespective of their location, what technology they're using, who their service provider is, and so on. And deviations from that idealized notion of an open internet due to sort of blocking or weakening of the kind of connectivity between endpoints, between willing endpoints, is I think the core concept and concern when talking about fragmentation. So, I guess when I think about this problem, I tend to differentiate in terms of the different layers of the internet protocol stack. Engineers tend to talk about problems occurring at the lower levels, the second and third levels of network and transport. Some people think of it more in terms of stuff happening at the application level, how applications function. A lot of academics, a lot of scholars who talk about the internet think of it as there's a sort of fifth nominal layer, you could say, of content and transactions. That's to say the markets, the digital spaces, and so on that users constitute using those lower levels. And to me, a lot of the fragmentation that is most interesting is at that level, at that fifth level of the space of flows that ties together people and processes from around the world. So when I think about fragmentation in this way, then I would say, you've got three different kinds of sources. Technical fragmentation, where you have developments in the underlying infrastructure that impede the ability of systems to fully interoperate and exchange data packets and to function consistently at all endpoints, and that's usually at the lower levels. Governmental fragmentation, which are policies and actions that constrain or prevent certain uses of the internet to create, distribute, or access information resources. These are generally targeted at the fifth layer that I just talked about, this kind of imaginary layer of flows, processes, etc. Although they can impact the lower levels as well. And commercial fragmentation, which again involves policies and actions that constrain or prevent certain uses and make it impossible for endpoints to be able to exchange resources and packets in order to create, distribute, and access information. So that's what I'm concerned with, is essentially blockages that occur. A lot of the technical fragmentation is not necessarily a function of the intention of particular actors to fragment. Very often it's the accumulation of different types of practices that have unintended consequences. But when we talk about commercial and governmental, very often what we are talking about there is an intentional act by a third party to essentially intercede between endpoints and establish a sort of break between their ability to communicate. So the last point I would make about all of this, and then because I think my 5 minutes is up, is that it's important to recognize that fragmentation is highly variable. So when we talk about it, we have to talk about different types of fragmentation in terms of not just a simple binary yes, no, there's fragmentation, no, there's not fragmentation, but in terms of the depth of the impact, for example. Some fragmentation may be deep, structural, and configure large parts of activity for a lot of actors, and other types of fragmentation may be more shallow and malleable and affect only a smaller range of actors or processes. So we have to look at how deep the impact is, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the character of it. You could even have positive fragmentation in a way. If there may be cases where one would think that it's a good thing to establish these kinds of blockages. We could debate that point. So I guess I will stop by simply saying my core concern in raising the notion of fragmentation is to say that it is a multidimensional phenomena that varies in depth, intensity, and so on. And in the particular case that you're talking about, it's net neutrality and deviations from it. It's a form of commercial fragmentation where you have business practices that essentially make it difficult for willing parties to reach each other, both suppliers of content and users. And this is potentially problematic. So I will stop there, and I'm here for any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. This was an excellent presentation to try to narrow down the concepts we'll be discussing here today. Thanks for offering these definitions. I'll come back to you with some follow-up questions after this first round. Then I'm going to go now with Cristina Monti, and I'm going to ask her what roles do the different stakeholders have to avoid fragmentation of the internet, Cristina?
Thank you, Diego, and good morning, everyone. Okay, it's a very broad and complex question. Connecting to what Bill was just saying, it is quite clear that responses to internet governance must be a joint effort involving all stakeholders, considering the complexity of the internet as a layer arrangement and the complexity of the phenomena that we have to deal when we talk about internet fragmentation. It is clear at the same time that the internet is a global infrastructure where different stakeholders need to work together. At the same time, from my perspective, the internet works well without strong structural oversight by international or intergovernmental bodies. But maybe more balance should be sought within the existing structures in order to both increase the legitimacy of current governance arrangements and to solve and avoid issues like internet fragmentation. We heard that there are different types of internet fragmentations, and I would say that depending on the areas and issues that we have to deal with, also different stakeholders can be sort of in the lead. So if we are talking about technical fragmentation, technical issues, then of course the technical community should be in the lead. And then there are other areas where maybe government and civil society could have a stronger role. So in a way, we should be careful when we consider, I'm talking also from my perspective from the European Commission, so when we talk about government's role, there are different visions in different areas of the world, and we have to make sure that the governments have to take care of ensuring that the rule of law is enforced and that they protect the public interest, but they have to be included in this more complex ecosystem. And this is not an easy thing to do. In this context, maybe I would like to bring here an example, a concrete example where I think, from my perspective again, the role of the public sector was important to avoid a form of internet fragmentation, which is net neutrality. And here I would like to bring forward the example of the European Union legislation on net neutrality, which was adopted and entered into force in 30th of April 2016, so this year. So now in the European Union we have a regulation. A regulation means that we have a law which is directly applicable in all European Union member states, and it is a law on the open internet. I think this is a major achievement also in terms of what we would like to do in removing obstacles and creating a digital single market in Europe. And I think it's important to stress that it introduces a principle of non-discriminatory traffic management and gives a right which is enforceable, an individual right to end users who can access and distribute internet content. So it is the result of a long a process of consultation with different players who, of course, had different interests and different views, both within the industry, but also civil society and, and civil society. And overall, we could say that it strikes a good balance. It helps to ensure that the internet remains open and an engine for innovation. That also will not create problem in terms of future developments of the internet from the technological point of view. If we consider Internet of Things, this kind of law would really like to promote that, on the other hand. And it allows for reasonable traffic management, and with this word, reasonable traffic management, what is meant is that considerations should be about technical quality requirements and not commercial considerations. So in a way, this is just an example. I think it helps and creates clarity and certainty for different stakeholders, and it is an example of a positive role that sometimes legislator can have in avoiding internet fragmentation. More generally, I would like to stress that the role of stakeholders in internet governance is at the center of discussions in different venues and in different fora. In particular, I think it's important to mention the CSCD working group on enhanced cooperation, where the role of different stakeholders, but in particular the role of governments, is discussed. And there the focus is on public policy issues and the role of governments on that. For us, from my perspective, it's important that clear principles are defined on what we mean. The devil is in the details and how you move forward. So we are still in the process of defining principles and see how they will be implementable. So on the basis of this principle, then we can move forward and address the many issues in internet governance, including internet fragmentation. And in talking about these principles, I think that the idea that we should work in a flexible and diverse way should be stressed. Again, as I was mentioning before, different kind of stakeholders need to cooperate, but in different roles, depending on the issues that they have to address. Of course, it's important that this cooperation is inclusive, responsive, effective, sustainable. These are all principles and also based on evidence, so we need clear facts. We need to know what is the problem and really define the issues very carefully before any actions are taken, because we know that this could have repercussions on a global level. And finally, just to stress that also human rights and fundamental freedoms, from our perspective, should be respected and promoted in any consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cristina. It was very interesting to hear from not only from the perspective of this topic of net neutrality and internet fragmentation, how important it is to define the roles and responsibility of the different stakeholders tackling these kind of issues. I'll get back to you with some follow-up questions as well. Now, Dr. Arun has joined us, so thanks for joining now. So I'm going to go now with Commissioner Clyburn. So Commissioner Clyburn, I have this question for you. What measures can be implemented to avoid discriminatory and/or anti-competitive practices among providers of internet access and content services or applications, while being able to protect the privacy and confidentiality of communications by end users and security in the networks?
Thank you very much. Very simple question you just posed, but I would like to thank the Federal Telecommunications Institute for both organizing this workshop and extending the invitation to me to join all of you this morning. I'm in awe of the panel construct. Internet fragmentation is concerning to those of us who believe that the internet is a platform for freedom, expression, and innovation. Threats of fragmentation may come from government actions, as we heard from Bill and others, that restrict internet access, commercial practices that impede access to content, or technical conditions that prevent systems from fully functioning. Some of the challenges are global in nature, attempts to undermine the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. Others are national in scope, government actions that seek to restrict freedom of expression on the internet, while others involve practices that limit access to certain types of content or impact universal connectivity. All of these challenges pose a threat to the open, global, and interconnected internet that has become a key driver of economic and social development and a platform for individual freedom and democracy. As an FCC commissioner, I will focus today on steps we took in the United States to prevent commercial practices that could result in internet fragmentation. The Open Internet Order we adopted last year is a reflection of the Federal Communications Commission's longstanding commitment to protect and promote a platform that nurtures freedom of speech and expression, supports innovation and commerce, and creates incentives for investment. The fundamental principle behind an open internet is that consumers should decide, not the government, not the broadband service provider, what users access online. It sees pay prioritization being at odds with the principle of non-discrimination that underpin the success of global internet. The rules also provide mobile parity, which means applying rules in the same way to both fixed and mobile internet service providers. Now, I consider this particular provision especially important because the majority of low-income Americans rely heavily on their mobile devices, and for some, that mobile device is their only access to the internet. Those individuals should not have to settle for a second-class online experience. These mobile users, like everyone else, need and deserve a robust experience on par with their wired peers. Our order also sought to advance and protect what we refer to as the virtuous cycle of innovation. In this cycle, new users of the network, including new applications, services, and devices, lead to increased end-user demand for broadband. That drives in network improvements, which in turn leads to further network uses. Each round of innovation increases the value of the internet for broadband providers, edge providers, online businesses, and yes, consumers. This concept is important when understanding the FCC's Open Internet Order and how it seeks to foster innovation while avoiding fragmentation that may result from a pay-to-play market environment. Absent clear and concrete open internet rules, any internet service provider would possess the power to limit free expression and innovation. An ISP could freely block, throttle, favor, or discriminate against traffic or extract tolls from any user for any reason or for no reason at all. Such discriminatory behavior would lead to a fragmentation of the internet where certain content may be inaccessible to certain citizens, changing the way we value the internet today. So you may ask me if this is a position based simply on theory. I will answer no. Providers in the United States have, in fact, blocked applications on mobile devices, which not only hampers free expression, but restricts competition and dampens innovation by allowing the companies that control the pipelines and airwaves, not the content creator or consumer, to pick winners and losers. Much like others here today, the FCC is carefully looking at zero rating as it pertains to net neutrality. Under the Open Internet rules, we are taking a look at sponsored data offerings on a case-by-case basis as these plans continue to evolve. In short, our rules help ensure that there is only one internet where all applications, products, ideas, and points of view have an equal chance of being seen and heard, and everyone has the same opportunities to succeed. So again, thank you once again for allowing me to join you, and I look forward to expanding on this very important topic.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Claiborne, and thank you very much as well for sticking to the 5 minutes. This is very much appreciated. Thank you. But we will follow up with some questions in the second round. Okay. We'll now go with Dr. Aaron, and I'm going to ask Dr. Aaron, what in your point of view are the causes of the internet fragmentation, and what impact could those have on society in general?
Thank you for the question. I want to begin by apologizing to everyone for being late. Ironically, I was in a session that looked to join different jurisdictions, and here I am in my fragmentation session now. So I want to encourage everyone who is interested in this to read the World Economic Forum report on fragmentation. I thought that it laid down the causes of fragmentation in a beautifully articulated manner. What I'm going to do is run you through some of these causes with examples of what has been happening in India, so that you can get a picture of how much of what the Commissioner has said applies across the world, but changes a little bit depending on the context that we're talking about. And so if you look at government-directed fragmentation, from the point of view of a country like ours, we would be talking in terms of issues like data localization. Now, this is often fueled by what I'm going to uncharitably call government paranoia, which is that data is located in other countries, and there are security concerns raised, and a lot of countries are beginning to feel like they want more control over data. Our last articulation of this was really interesting because it was the telecommunications regulator that sort of raised this as an option in their paper, in their consultation paper about how to regulate cloud computing. And so one of the questions that they were looking at is that if we're outsourcing data, is it sustainable to require people to host the data in India? And so we had to explain to them the kind of impact that that would have on the economy, on innovation, on the security of the data if you host it in a single place. But at the same time, the cloud computing paper raised the second question of data privacy and how do you ensure that. And in the Center for Communication Governance's response, we were faced with a bit of a challenge because Indian privacy law is not very well articulated. And although we are located in a country that broadly recognizes human rights and the right to privacy, we also take the position that human rights cannot be fragmented based on which country and which legal regime individuals are based in. And so our stand is that when we're coming up with regulatory regimes, whether they are market-oriented or whether they come from nation states, they need to embed the international human rights instruments principles, because we say that the right to privacy should be offered to all citizens regardless of what their national governments feel about it. And so our challenge in responding to the regulator was in working out how cross-border regulation of privacy would happen, even in the context of something like cloud computing. And I have to say that it was very difficult, and we are grateful for scholars in other countries for developing frameworks. We're still learning. The other debate, which many of you might have heard of, both in the context of India as well as the US, is the net neutrality debate. As you know, that's really been raging in India, and we've been closely involved with all of this. Now, parts of this deal with net neutrality, as the Commissioner described beautifully, but the part that we were really interested in is this idea of zero-rated internet for people that supposedly don't have access to the internet. And in that context, firstly, Commissioner, I want to say thank you for that powerful articulation of one internet for everyone, because we've had to spend the last 2 years explaining to people around the world that this sort of separate internet for poor people is not an acceptable idea, that it is not okay to come and tell people from India that you should be grateful that you have access to some part of the internet. It's better than no internet. And so one of the things that we did, and we were delighted that the regulator adopted our response in the end, is we explained to them that the right to freedom of speech and expression in India includes the right to receive information. And that includes the right to receive a diversity of information. It is the responsibility of the regulator to regulate both the markets and the technology in a manner in which this right is preserved. This is something that the regulator actually adopted in its findings. And I know that they're continuing to work on this, so if anyone is following the telecom regulator in India, please do feel free to write to them. Professor Barbara Van Schevik's work was very useful to a lot of us when we were articulating our findings. And the final part, because I should stick to my 5 minutes, is that I want to point out that parts of this whole connectivity debate lead not just to internet fragmentation, but to social fragmentation on questions of the gender divide. You know, if you're connecting marginalized people, you'll find that they have differentiated access to the internet. But also the people that are online have a fragmented access to the internet depending on their own capacities, the language that they speak, whether they're literate, because that would influence whether they're only looking at video content or not, and the spaces in which they can engage, because the manner in which a debate is conducted can exclude people depending on, you know, basically how they talk to each other. And that's just something that I'd like to put on the table, because I find that in a lot of fragmentation and access debates, this entire piece of how society engages is lost. So I just feel like it's worth putting out there. That's it.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Aaron. This was excellent, and thank you for entering this new concept of debate on the table. So I'm going to go now to Commissioner Fromo, and later on I'm going to go with Dr. Layton on purpose, because I want to connect one of the questions to the second round of questions. So Commissioner Fromo, I have these questions for you. In terms of net neutrality, how can we differentiate permanent congestion from the temporary and exceptional one, and how to differentiate it from the lack of investment and proper sizing of the networks?
Thank you. I would like to thank the invitation to participate in this relevant workshop. It is a pleasure for me to be here and share with you some information regarding net neutrality issues since the Mexico constitutional reform on telecommunication and broadcasting in 2013. One of the most essential elements of this reform is the human rights approach. From that moment, information and communication technologies, as well as broadcasting and telecommunication services, especially broadband and internet access, are seen as a public service, so the Mexican state has the duty of guaranteeing the right of access to them and establish the condition for a better competition in providing such services. The reform created the Federal Institute of Telecommunication, the IFT, in September 2013 as an autonomous, self-governing regulatory body for telecommunication and broadcasting sectors. The main purpose of the Institute is the efficient development of broadcasting and telecommunication, as well as being the authority in economic competition of these sectors. This new framework allows the implementation of convergent license to provide all services with nationwide coverage. Regarding to net neutrality issues, it is specified in our secondary law, the Federal Telecommunication and Broadcasting Law of 2014, that the ISPs providing internet access services should comply with the general net neutrality guidelines that IFT plan to issue during the first half of the next year. About internet fragmentation, we are analyzing the European Union regulations concerning open internet access in order to include some provision in the mentioned guidelines. This European Union regulation specifies that traffic management measures that go beyond reasonable traffic management measures may only be applied as necessary and for as long as necessary to comply with justified exceptions, such as to protect the integrity and security of the networks, for example, by preventing cyber attacks that occur through the spread of malicious software or identity theft of end users that occurs as a result of a spyware. Moreover, measures going beyond such reasonable traffic management measures might also be necessary to prevent impending network congestion. That is, situation where congestion is about to materialize and to mitigate the effects of network congestion where such congestion occurs only temporarily or in exceptional circumstances. The principle of proportionality requires that traffic management measures based on that exception treat equivalent categories of traffic equally. Temporary congestion should be understood as referring to a specific situation of short time duration, where a sudden increase in the number of users in addition to the regular user or a sudden increase in demand for a specific content, application, or services may overthrow the transmission capacity of some elements of the network and make the rest of the network less reactive. Temporary congestion might occur especially in mobile networks, which are subject to more variable conditions, such as physical obstructions, lower indoor coverage, or a variable number of active users with changing location. While it may be predictable that such temporary congestion might occur from time to time at certain points in the network, such that it cannot be regarded as exceptional. It might not recur so often and for such extensive periods of time that a capacity expansion will be economically justified. Exceptional congestion should be understood as referring to unpredictable and unavailable situation of congestion, both in mobile and fixed networks. Possible causes of those situations include a technical failure, such as service outage due to broken cables or other infrastructure elements, unexpected change in routing of traffic, or larger increase in network traffic due to emergency or other situation beyond the control of providers of internet access services. Such congestion problems are likely to be infrequent, but may be severe and are not necessarily of short duration. The need to apply traffic management measures going beyond the reasonable traffic management measures is in order to prevent or mitigate the effects of temporary or exceptional network congestion should not give providers of network access services, internet access services, the possibility to circumvent the general prohibition of blocking, slowing down, altering, restricting, interfering with, degrading, or discriminating between a specific content, application, or services, or specific categories thereof. Recurrent and more long-lasting network congestion, which is neither exceptional nor temporarily, should not benefit from that exception, but should rather be tackled through expansion of network capacity. As I mentioned before, it is expected that IFT issue the general net neutrality guidelines based on the mandate of the Federal Telecommunication and Broadcasting Law of 2014 during the first half of 2017, the first half of next year, and we are going to incorporate some provision regarding internet fragmentation in network congestion situations. In this context, the IFT is committed to provide certainty to the ISP in order to attract investment in telecommunication sector so new services, content, and application can be offered to more Mexican users. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fromo, for offering this explanation of where the process is in Mexico. There's a newly information guidelines, so I'll come back to you later. But now we have Dr. Layton. I want to ask you something that I think can be very useful in terms of having also present here 2 or 3 experiences of net neutrality rules. But you have studied these net neutrality rules around the world. What can you say about the outcomes from your research of the different regimes?
So, well, good morning, everyone. Before I go into my remarks, I just want to take a moment to thank the IFT for the invitation. It's very kind of you. I'm delighted to be a part of the panel. And I just want to congratulate the IFT on 3 years of becoming a converged regulator. This was really a tremendous activity you've gone through to bring together different sector regulators into one. So congratulations to you for that. And also, you're in the midst of building, if I'm not mistaken, one of the world's largest mobile networks. You have made an award for your Red Compartida, which is this wholesale mobile wireless network. So all of us are going to be watching that, and congratulations as well. I'm with Aalborg University in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm also a proud member of the Dynamic Coalition on Net Neutrality. Please join us tomorrow at 9 a.m., where we will release the 4th report of the coalition. And I think that this discussion of fragmentation, it has been one of the things that we've talked about over the years, and we're looking into that. And what I would like to offer is just a summary of my research on net neutrality rules around the world. Where I have looked at some 50 countries that have rules and the different legal instruments used to make rules, and then trying to see which types of regimes do the best job to deliver the promised outcomes. And specifically, I've been looking at mobile networks and application-level innovation, so mobile apps. So what I'm interested to see is that which country has, since they put their rules in place, which country does the best job to increase the level of mobile app innovation. So we can see in the world amongst these 50 countries, we have countries with soft rules, hard rules, and no rules. Soft rules are multi-stakeholder models, as we use here at the IGF, self-regulation, codes of conduct, principles. We have countries with hard rules, which is, of course, legislation through the will of the people, and, of course, regulation. And we have countries with no rules, not that they're not contemplating them, but there's nothing specifically as such about net neutrality. And because we have such a diversity and heterogeneity amongst the countries, I wanted to look very specifically at 2 similar countries, but with very different rules. So I have looked at Denmark and Netherlands because they're very advanced, have lots of networks, but they chose very different approaches at roughly the same time. So for example, Denmark said in 2011, we want self-regulation. The telecom operators said, we don't want to be regulated, so we will agree to principles that are even tougher than net neutrality rules. We will promise a quality guarantee. They wanted to get ahead of where the regulations were. And then, of course, we all know about the Netherlands, which has made a law, and then subsequently toughened the law, if you will, making restrictions on zero rating and so on. What's interesting is 5 years later, if we look at the amount of apps produced in these particular countries, there are more apps made today in Denmark than in Netherlands, and significantly so. This is the opposite of what I had expected. And the Danish apps are used globally. They have and this would not seem, it's contradictory to what you'd think, because the Dutch sit on an internet exchange, they have lots of peering points, and so on, but the Danes have succeeded to produce world-leading apps and games and health and content and so forth. And in fact, the largest Danish app today has more traffic, revenue, and downloads than the top 20 largest Dutch apps. So this is a very odd outcome when you looked at the types of net neutrality rules chosen. So what is the difference here? Because both of the countries have very similar networks. Well, when you look more closely, it turns out that Denmark has post-paid data rates at 1/3 higher than the Netherlands. Now that's very odd. Well, why should you care? Well, if you are an app developer, you want to make sure that there's a lot of 3G and 4G networks in your country, because if you're an app maker, you want to have people with smartphones who are going to use those networks. So the Danes had succeeded to get more postpaid subscriptions in the marketplace at a higher rate, 1/3 higher. Now, why was this? This is because there's greater commercial freedom in Denmark. The operators for a long time had a lot more freedom in how they sold their subscriptions. They could partner, the mobile operators can partner with content providers to create local packages relevant for the particular marketplace. That's not allowed in the Netherlands. All the operators that tried to do that were fined. So there's a kind of a chilling effect on the innovation that would be interesting for the particular end users. So in any case, I'm continuing in the research because there's still a lot of unanswered questions. For example, we have a lot of innovation today that comes from countries with no net neutrality rules. China, Russia, Belarus, we're increasingly using Chinese apps. So what does that say? It doesn't follow this idea that we have that innovation's only coming from places where there are strong open internet rules. The other thing that doesn't follow what the expectation is that many of the Latin American countries which made hard rules years ago have not succeeded to produce the global apps that we use every day. This is a real concern for a lot of Latin American countries. The traffic in their countries is 99.1. 99% of their traffic goes to apps in foreign countries. The revenue leaves their country. They're not using apps they make themselves. This is really odd because we believe if we have hard net neutrality rules, it should be easier for the app makers in those countries to get their apps up. So in any case, what I would like to say, at least my preliminary conclusion is if we want to resolve this concern we have about fragmentation, we should go back to multi-stakeholder models for net neutrality. We practice this with the IGF every day. This is proven for internet governance overall. One of the things we've seen in countries with soft rules is that there's no litigation. A real challenge with countries with hard rules is we have lots of litigation. That's a lot of money being sucked away from investment. And clearly the multi-stakeholder is a place where we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of practice, and that can certainly be helpful to manage these issues going forward.
Thank you very much, Dr. Layton. We're going to start now the second round of questions. I'm going to ask the panelists one follow-up question, and I'm going to ask you please to keep it to 2 or 3 minutes at the most, so that we can open the floor for conversation. And now I'm going to start backwards. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Layton, if you don't mind. So it's interesting because you were sharing some of the let's say, indicators of how success may look like after enacting some sort of regulation or self-regulation around net neutrality. And you were seeing and exposing the case of the number of applications. What other indicators do you think can tell us how successful one the introduction of some sort of regulation on net neutrality could be?
So, well, thank you for that question. One of the, I think it's very interesting, and I'm so glad we started out with Dr. Drake to beginning, what is fragmentation? And we had a great panel yesterday on community networks, which was a fascinating discussion about different communities and building their networks. And one of the key issues, I think, all of us want to get more networks, make them more available. But we need to remember that people don't adopt networks, they adopt services over networks. And that one of the important issues that we need to start with, what are the services that people need? There'll be great research later today from Shar Srinivasan and Christopher Yu actually looking at these kinds of measures. And I think they're probably the best. They have a lot of, they'll present some good data. But the one thing that I want to mention to follow up on some other research I've done with zero rating, I've looked at free basics in a number of countries, and particularly in the areas of mobile health. So I've identified 10 million net new users who adopted free basics for their mHealth capabilities. People in Africa who are using it for if they're having AIDS, pregnant women who are using this one particular app because that is their only means to get health care. And this is, cases where, you have a real challenge where people need to check, is their AIDS medicine fake? Is it, and they're using apps using these kinds of free apps to do that. So in terms of a measure of whether the net neutrality rule is working, I think, it will depend upon what you value as important. If, in fact, you say that more people today are getting healthcare online, shouldn't that be more important is whether or not we have net neutrality rules? We have a great example in a Colombian app called Uno Doc Tres, where people are able to ask a health question, and they're using this through, through zero-rated platforms. These are people who've never seen doctors in their lives before, and that they're being able to access free data to do that. So what I would take the step back and say, what are we trying to maximize first? What is the social goal that we want to realize? Do we want to have more people get health care online, to get a job online, to be able to check weather information? To me, that is the more important goal to maximize than, what kind of a net neutrality rule do I have and how effective is it? It should really be looking at the top line social goals that we want to realize.
Thank you very much, Rosalind. Now I'm going to ask Commissioner Fromo. So it has been said, Commissioner Fromo, that it's very important to, whenever a country is discussing net neutrality and internet fragmentation, to involve and encourage the participation from different stakeholders. Could you share with us how has the process been in Mexico in terms of interacting with other stakeholders? And if you can just share as well main concerns they had regarding the guidelines that you are trying to put forward.
Yeah, the IFT thinks that having a multi-stakeholder approach is a very important issue in order to establish a new regulation, mainly in this area of internet governance. So we also, according to our law, the secondary law, the Article 51 established that for the issuance and amendment of rules, guidelines, or general administrative provisions, the IFT shall carry out public consultation under the principle of transparency and citizen participation, and the Institute shall prepare and make public an analysis of regulatory impact. Also, the Institute shall have a space between its internet portal specifically designated to publish and maintain updated the process of public consultation and a calendar of the consultation to be made. The answers or proposal made to the Institute should not be binding without prejudice to the Institute. Consider them in a document that reflects the results of such consultation. Therefore, it means that we are going to consider seriously what are the requirements and the proposal of the industry, the academic, and the civil society in this topic in order to set the corresponding regulatory roadmap and policies. But in the net neutrality environment in Mexico, we have to decide, among other issues, if we are going to permit zero rating for some specific application or contents, and under what kind of or circumstances, but not only for commercial application, but also, for example, for financial inclusion or the educational application. One of our major mobile service provider, mobile broadband service provider in Mexico, is already offering educational application using a zero rating approach. And also in Mexico, the 3 major mobile operators are offering zero rating for such applications as Twitter, WhatsApp, and Facebook. So we have to take a decision in order to formally permit it or prohibit it. And also, I wondering if the same net neutrality rules or regulation should apply in developed countries and developing countries. We have to analyze that, and we are going to issue the guidelines that are mandated by our secondary law.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Fromo. So I will go now with Dr. Aaron for a follow-up question. So you mentioned this concept of government paranoia. What would be, in your opinion, something that the process or different stakeholders can do to give this peace of mind to governments and avoid this kind of paranoia?
I think transparency and accountability go a long way in allaying everyone's paranoia, not just governments. And I know that one of the big trigger points that is probably familiar to everyone is when the Snowden revelations happened. Now this was information that took a lot of people by surprise, and they reacted saying that, hey, there are some countries with this extra access to data, they're spying on us, and so we need to protect our data. And the best way around it really is if governments and large companies can come to an agreement, ideally with soft rules, in which they are as transparent as possible, and they create appeal mechanisms if possible, so that all major stakeholders have a sense, not just that they know what is going on with their data or data that they have an interest in, but also that they have some recourse if there is a practice that they disagree with. I know that Rebecca McKinnon has been doing a lot of work towards this. The Internet and Jurisdiction Project is doing a lot of work towards this. And I feel like if the Global Network Initiative is another space where this is happening. If we succeed and we create this framework, it will build trust, and there'll be less paranoia, would be my thinking.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aaron. So, besides the case of Mexico, we have two paradigmatic cases now, the one in the United States and the one in the European Union. So I'm going more or less to ask you the same question. I'm going to go first with Commissioner Clyburn. And also a little bit in the sense of what I asked Dr. Layton is, how do we measure success? How are you measuring success in the United States, for example, of the FCC? Can we consider that this have been a successful measure already? And how enforceable are these rules? Are they easy to follow? How can you really see if some of the carriers or others are not following them?
So I'll answer it. I jokingly say, and I shouldn't joke at an international conference because, you know, what's funny to me is not going to be funny to three-quarters in a room. But I often say when somebody ask a question, you answer it like a debutante the way you want to answer. That might not be funny to some people who weren't debutantes. But, or maybe it would not be funny to a person who's a debutante. But I'll approach it this way because I really appreciate the sequence in which you ask. Because everything is a building block to what I know that that you will say more eloquently, but I'll give a shot at it. When I heard you talk about, and I think it's very appropriate, that people do not adapt or adopt networks, they adopt services over the networks. To me, that is the driving force behind what is so incredible about our open internet order. So the first thing is going to seem kind of obvious to you, but I'll say it anyway because sometimes obvious is not clear. We all need a solid understanding of how broadband markets and networks work. You know, again, simple words, you know, but when I talked about that virtuous cycle of innovation and what the cause and effects are, you know, if you didn't have all of this, internet content and applications and services, you wouldn't have all of this, investment and expansion and hope and promise around the world. The second thing is that, based on what you said, Dr. Arun, you seem like a doctor if you're not, that we need protective rules to guard against the harmful conduct we know today. We know that fear, often, especially in the United States with seniors, fear is second to affordability, is a number one barrier for a number of people going online. So we need to make sure that we're the cop on the beat, and so we shouldn't apologize for that as regulators to kind of offend the other part of the room that might be, companies here. I don't apologize for that because I think it's beneficial to all of us. And finally, we need flexibility when it comes to standards and authority in order to address problems when they arise. There is no way at this point in time that we can predict what's to come and what's expected or what. When we're talking about 5G and the Internet of Things, back home, there is no way that every little line and footnote in our open internet order would anticipate what the future would hold. So all of the things that we're talking about, no throttling, no blocking, no prioritization, flexible standards, and really an understanding of markets and what it will further enable, I think for me, are the sort of the preamble, so to speak, of our open internet order. I might have gone over 2 minutes, but I think you forgive me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So the same question goes to you, Christina, in the case of the European Union.
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with many of the things you just said. Of course, it's all a matter of striking the right balance between different interests. And if we compare also the approach that the European Union and the US have had, I mean, overall we want to keep the internet open and free. I was also very interesting to hear that there are data and evidence showing that sometimes hard regulation rules on hard rules on net neutrality are not allowing strong innovation. On the other hand, I also know that OECD is working a lot on collecting data, and they are collecting evidence showing that openness of the internet is leading to strong innovation. So it would be interesting. I think that also, so one thing is striking the right balance between different interests. Another important thing is collecting data and evidence and understanding really the situation on the ground. In terms of course, the European Union recent legislation is really recent, so now it will have to be put to the test. Main difference, I think, is that in our case, in the European Union, it is really a law. So it went through all the legislative process, European Parliament, Council of Ministers, so very long process, but it gives a real right to the end user. How are we going to implement that? Here, of course, in Europe, we have a special situation. We are a union of different member states, and in each member state, we have national regulators, and they will have the primary responsibility to monitor and enforce compliance with the open internet rules. So these authorities will have the power and obligation to examine how the traffic management practices of internet services providers affect the end users, both consumers and businesses. So they will have this special role. One additional remark, if I may, I think when we talk about internet fragmentation, we should also keep in mind that some forms of fragmentation might be positive, like, for instance, those that are necessary to ensure privacy, to ensure that we protect vulnerable users, like children, or those to fight hate speech online. I just wanted to pinpoint to that. And finally, also, I think that we should strive to avoid what we could define as jurisdictional fragmentation, where all different governments in the world go into different directions. It's very hard, but we will have to make an effort, maybe in discussions like those that we have here at the IGF, to ensure some sort of interoperability in our rules. And finally, I'm also very glad that the Mexicans are looking at the rules that we developed in Europe. So we are also having formal dialogues and discussions also to advance on these issues. And if there are any clarifications on information or help that we might provide, we are at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. And we're going to go with Bill Drake very quickly before we open the floor to questions. So, Bill, and also it's one of the things that Christina addressed at the end, you also mentioned in your presentation, and I wanted to follow up on that as well. Maybe you can expand a little bit. So you also said that there is some kind of unintentional intervention and some other kind of intervention that can be positive. Christina just mentioned that of privacy, but what other kind of interventions or of kind of fragmentations could be considered as positive in your point of view, Bill?
Well, actually, I mean, I think it's sort of, in a way, being a little bit elastic with the term. When I think about fragmentation as being something that prevents willing endpoints from communicating, it's a little bit harder to identify the really positive aspects of any kind of intervention that precludes that. But nevertheless, we do want to recognize that the internet is not a completely wide open space, and that people do choose to say, well, I'm not willing. That's to say, I mean, we all have firewalls. We all use, or many people use VPNs and other things that segment themselves off, encryption, etc., that make you, that sort of like close your door to the big outside world. We don't all allow all bits to come through in an unmitigated way. And I guess you could view that as a kind of positive fragmentation. But again, I'm using the word in a kind of an expansive manner in that sense. I just wanted to flag one other point, though. Listening to, there were a lot of very interesting interventions, so I really enjoyed all the comments that were being made. But a number of people have noted that the solution, or one part of the solution, is we need multi-stakeholder dialogue and so on and so forth. And I guess I just want to underscore that in a way, because I think sometimes, particularly in the IGF context, it becomes very easy for everybody to sort of like sing the praise of multi-stakeholder cooperation as if it was the panacea that solves all problems. But of course, it doesn't necessarily. Cooperation, certainly those of us who are heavily involved in ICANN can tell you that decision making that has concrete distributional outcomes for particular actors can be very difficult to undertake in a multi-stakeholder setting. It's not necessarily going to be any easier than an intergovernmental one. But nevertheless, I think there's a point that really has to be recognized. Any solution to fragmentation and to preserving internet openness that's going to be really sustainable in this kind of environment, I think does require the buy-in and implementation efforts of people outside the state sector. I mean, you just can't, in the internet environment is simply one in which the private sector, technical community, civil society, and other types of organizations just play too important a role. And you can't really, I watch a lot of these processes, the G7, the G8, G20, OECD, and so on, where they're talking about the importance of preserving an open internet and avoiding fragmentation, and I'm glad they're saying that. But what they're not doing is fully engaging the range of stakeholders that are really relevant to the problem in a collective problem-solving kind of activity. So I hope that we can find a way to actually make multi-stakeholder cooperation more practically salient and useful in addressing these problems. And it's something we're doing as a follow-up to the fragmentation paper in WEF. We're now doing further work on data localization and barriers to transborder data flows with an eye towards trying to build that kind of multi-stakeholder cooperation. So I just wanted to flag that point. I think that multi-stakeholder is important, but we have to keep in mind that it's not easy, and the solutions are not always evident. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bill. Now we're going to open the floor for questions and comments. Please introduce yourself very briefly before asking the question or making a comment. We're going to alternate also with remote participation. We're going to start here. So please, Chris. And then we go there.
Chris Ostrek from Telefonica. Hello to everyone. Thanks very much. Very interesting debate. I wanted to highlight one issue, and it's the one of zero rating. I think we had various views on zero rating, and I think that zero rating is really a very complex concept. I mean, there's so many different ways of doing zero rating. There has nothing to do CO rating of a video service in a developed market like Germany, with a CO rated service in Africa, as the ones Rosalind pointed out. There are a lot of different ways of doing CO rating. So please, let's not discuss CO rating, because if you discuss CO rating, we'll have no results whatsoever. I mean, you have to discuss a specific market situation, and a specific application of CO rating. I mean, that's the first comment. And the second is, what struck me, and I think, thanks very much to Rosalind for highlighting it, is we are discussing this concept of net neutrality for years now. I mean, this is my 7th IGF, and every year we have net neutrality debate. But we never come back with data. And we always stick to the concept and the good idea and the what-if debate, and that's good, but I mean, where is the data? I mean, has anyone looked at what's really happening in markets after net neutrality regulation? Has anyone looked into markets where they have no net neutrality regulation? So this is very important. I mean, we cannot base policy making, just on beliefs or something. We have to base it on data, and the data is not there. So I would just like to highlight that here, because it's a very important issue. And having said that, just to come back to one point I think Christina raised, I think also very important. The European laws have passed a debate of 3 years through all kinds of parliaments, governments, including governments like the Dutch, for example, which has a very radical view on net neutrality, and others who have a very more liberal view on that. And I think they have come to a very good, balanced view on net neutrality. So I would just invite people to look at it, because it's a very extensive process, and it has come to an interesting result, which, by the way, again, is not prohibiting CO rating. Also to highlight that, okay?
Okay, I have to question the gentleman over there. Raise the hand, then I'm going here, and then over there, and then probably here. And if there's a remote question, please. Okay, so we go to you.
Okay,
please.
thank
Please
you very
introduce
much. My name's Alan Lewine. I'm here with privacyfundamentals.org, a new player looking to promote privacy and security through best practices, through transparency and accountability attention. Formerly in-house counsel with Comcast, and before that I worked with AOL and also PBS. So I've played on various sides of this issue over time. My question really is for Mignon Clyburn and the panel in general, really. I think there's a lot of unintended consequences that sometimes come from the regulatory attempts, well-intentioned as they are, to promote an open internet and net neutrality. There are real costs to carriage of data. When large players, content providers, are pushing a tremendous amount of data through the networks, there are real costs to building out the infrastructure to make that happen. And by mandating no costs to the content providers from the ISP for coverage, aren't you really choosing who charges the end user for the real costs of building out the network?
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn, do you want to react to that?
Well, I'll react officially one way, and I'll talk to you in another way. That's my motto. Exactly. So, what I'll say to this is, going back to what we said earlier about, how every action has, either a positive or a negative consequence. I yield to what you said, but I also say when you construct and use, it's like, when I look at this, ecosystem, I go back to my old days of state regulation when I was doing more energy. And one of the things that I keep in mind here too is when we were doing natural gas, and you had to build that conduit, that pipe, so to speak, that could be huge. One of the things that we did was have a different sort of construct for, I would say, the industrial customers. They paid less than we did. And so it wasn't fair from that, seemingly from that standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint. But the benefits accrued and accumulated along the way. I say to you, I hear what you're saying. We'll talk a little bit more offline. But the benefits I counter to you are positive, along the way. You might have to build and support more. But I will say to you that will come to you, who you used to represent, and who you might still represent, as a positive economic consequence. Because if you can do more, you can offer more and enable more. So I think that investment is well worth it.
So we have Carlos. Do you want?
Hello, my name is Carlos Brito. I'm from NAR3D, Digital Rights Defense Network, an NGO based in Mexico City. I have two questions, one for Dr. Roslin. Well, you established on your data about Netherlands and Denmark that there is, the whole point, as far as I understood, is that the app applications production was linked to net neutrality rules, soft and hard. But I don't understand what's the causality link on apps productions towards the regulation exactly. I know that net neutrality argument has said that protects innovation, but I don't think that's a major force for applications production. And the second one is for Commissioner Fromo. Well, of course, in the IFT in Mexico, well, we expect to have not a copy-paste of other regulations from other countries, but we're dealing with human rights, and the design of regulators in the world is very different. Mexico's regulator is particularly different, sui generis. And net neutrality legislations come in Mexico from the freedom of expression article in the Constitution. And the state obligations of every single state are different as well. So the assessment that has to be made to bring the rules, in the case of Mexico, maybe we'll have to take into account the human rights discourse and necessary ponderations that I think that BEREC has started to do in introducing human rights language. So can we agree that Mexico will have to take as the center the human rights obligations that comes from the legal framework that net neutrality has?
Carlos, we still have one more question, but I'll go with Mario and Rosly if you want to briefly, telegraphically reply to Carlos.
Thank you very much for the question. As I said, one of the most essential elements of the constitutional reform on telecommunication and broadcasting in 2013 is their human rights approach. And from that moment, Internet is seen as a public service. So the Mexican state has the duty to guarantee the right of access to these services. So it was mentioned, the IFT is working for 3 years, and in all the decisions, not only in this, not only in the internet-related issues, but in all the decisions that we took, the human rights approach and the human rights obligation is the center of our decisions, always. The customer, the audience is in the center of all the decision of the IFT, and that will be, for the case of net neutrality guidelines, will be the case. Because we know that this internet is a medium for human rights in order to be applied in a better way. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Layton.
So, Carlos, thank you for the question, and I'm happy to speak with you after if I don't give you a satisfying answer. But let me say, as a policy researcher, I'm very interested to see, can we make rules and laws that achieve their objective? So, for example, the European net neutrality law says the purpose of this law is to guarantee the internet as a source of innovation. That's very strong language, that it suggests that the European lawmakers apparently know something that nobody else does, and that they know that this particular choice of an instrument will create more innovation. Now, if you study innovation, we don't, in fact, have good measures of innovation. We talk about it in general, but if you look around the world, we don't have very hard measures of innovation. So it seems a little bit of a stretch if we don't measure innovation at all, and then we can also assert that net neutrality ensures innovation, okay? We don't have great measures for those things. The only reason I'm looking at apps is because it's a proxy, because we don't have anything else. My starting point is, Barbara von Schewick, who has talked about we need to put the importance on application innovation is more important than network innovation, okay? You may beg to differ, because if you're working with a 1 megabit DSL network and then suddenly you have a 4G network, you might say, well, gee, perhaps I prefer the network level innovation. You know, storage might be important. Semiconductors, all of that network level innovation might matter. But the lawmakers in this case are saying that they are favoring the application innovation, that it's a guarantee. And so what I would say is, fine, I take your point. Let's see that the evidence will show it. So in any case, let me just wrap up this point here. If we accept that the internet is an ecosystem, and if we study ecosystems, we know that all parts of the ecosystem must interact. So there's a disconnect in creating rules that constrain one part of the ecosystem. They all need to interact together in a complementary way, in a symbiotic way. So that is my point of struggle here, that rules that say we're going to suppress an important actor in the system so that the other one can flourish. Well, in natural systems, when you do that, it creates havoc in your natural ecosystem. So the point here, I think, is just simply to say pricing flexibility. You know, I know we get lost in this zero rating discussion. The point is, I'm glad you all like my point about we adopt networks for the services, not the networks. If we adopt it for the services, then we should price the services flexibly. The idea of treating all the data the same is at odds with the notion of valuing the services for their value. If it's health service, we want to maximize, right? If it is, you know, entertainment, whatever, then we should allow the markets to work to price those things flexibly so we maximize the social goals.
So thank you very much. One quick last question from the lady next to the camera.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Veronica. I'm come from Peru, Youth IGF, and Youth Observatory too. My point here is that, well, as you know, Peru has no regulation on net neutrality. We were discussing this last year. We tried to pass a law on net neutrality, but at the end, law is sleeping and we don't have nothing now. The problem is that we tried to raise this into the ground. What is happening? We had this year a phenomenon called Pokemon Go, and it was very popular for everyone, okay? And we want all to have this free, for free, to use our mobile phones and use Pokemon Go, and doesn't have to pay anything for that. And competition goes well with this, because we build groups on Facebook asking mobile companies to give us free Pokemon Go, and it happens. First of all, one company, the next day was the other company, and that's competition. For us, it's completely great, because we're having Pokemon Go for free. The problem is that regulation on net neutrality in my country was built on the idea that the government or the national authority needs to say yes to this program, or yes to this zero rating program that they're trying to launch, and that takes a lot of time. If the authority will take like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then who is losing? We are losing. So that's my point. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your question. We've reached the end of the time, and well, thanks for showing that the Youth IGF is here making the next generation questions, so we are so happy to have you here. Finally, I would like to thank you most of all for the IFT for organizing such a great panel, also for being very good at choosing the panelists. They were fantastic, amazing, all of you. Thank you very much for being engaged, and thank you all of you, and let's give them a round of applause.